Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Next Up Narcissism. Today, we're talking all about the dynamics between narcissistic mothers and their adult daughters. This is a topic that I know many of you have asked me to speak about numerous times. It's something that is very difficult for people to discuss, mostly because, well, it's your mom. And we hear this from people all the time. Well, you only have one mom, and, if this is your mom, she loves you. And so what do we do with that when you are, in fact, dealing with a mom who has narcissistic personality disorder? Unfortunately, those societal cliches don't hold up. So in this episode, I take a deep dive into what narcissistic mothers and their behaviors look like, and how it affects the children growing up. More importantly, how it affects the daughters as they go through life and once they become the adults. I give you some tips and strategies on how to manage boundaries, and more importantly, ways to normalize and validate the feelings that you have if you find yourself in this situation. I think you'll really enjoy this episode and find it extremely helpful. Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Next Up Narcissism. Today, we are diving deep into narcissistic parents and their adult children. Today's episode is going to specifically focus on narcissistic moms and their adult daughters. I will, in the future, do an episode on narcissistic moms and their adult sons, as well as narcissistic fathers. But for today, we're going to focus specifically on narcissistic moms and their adult daughters. And the reason why I like to do these episodes separately is because the truth is, narcissistic moms and dads present differently in their dynamics, and they each present differently when dealing with a son versus a daughter. And it's very complicated and multi-layered, and so that's why I really like to focus on one dynamic at a time. So, narcissistic moms and their adult daughters. One of the things that is essential to understand about narcissistic moms, just like in an intimate relationship with a narcissistic partner, we are left with this mind-blowing concept of, do they know they're doing this? And unfortunately, same with intimate relationships. Yes, the narcissistic mother does know what she's doing. And we'll get into why. As I've talked about a million times before, the behaviors that narcissists engage in general, are very purpose-based, meaning all of their behaviors have a function. They are all deliberate, they're all calculated. Now, are some of those behaviors so automatic that maybe the person doesn't realize they're doing it at the time? Absolutely. That's like for any of us. If we do a behavior over and over and over again, eventually we habituate to it and we can do it without thinking. But here's the difference. And I get this a lot with narcissistic parents whose kids come to me, adult kids come to me. This idea that they don't know they're doing it. Here's a really quick way to convince yourself that that's not accurate. First, let's say that you and your narcissistic mom are arguing about something and she's not seeing how you're seeing it and you're not seeing how she's seeing it, and it's a big old just cluster mess. When the unhealthy behavior is brought to the attention of the narcissistic parent, okay? So let's say the daughter says to the narcissistic mom, "Mom, do you realize that every time I do this, you respond this way and it's so hurtful?" The narcissistic parent is going to take a pause. Maybe it's been an automatic pilot for so long they don't even realize they're doing the same behaviors. But when it's brought to their attention and they slow down for a second, their response is going to sound something like, "You're so dramatic. You overreact. That's not what I meant. You're taking it the wrong way. You're so sensitive. You've always been so sensitive your whole life. I'm your mother. I love you. Why would I hurt you? This is all in your head." You always say this about me. You do things that are hurtful too. You're going to get something like that. But let's just say it's not a narcissistic parent. And you're arguing with your mom, and she's doing these patterns that are really hurtful. And you say to her, Mom, it's really hurtful that you're saying that. You do this all the time. I really don't like how it makes me feel. A non-narcissistic parent is going to respond something like, I didn't realize I was doing that. I'm sorry. I don't want to hurt you. I'm working on it. Or I never realized I did that. Thank you for telling me. Or I know I do this. I know it hurts you. I'm so sorry. I will try harder. And they mean it. The difference between those two responses, regardless if they're aware that they were doing the behavior or not, is one totally ignores all accountability, ignores how they're making their child feel, has no intention of changing, and in fact deflects it onto the child to make it like it's the child that's wrong. The child's overreacting. The child's being dramatic. In the other situation, though, you don't hear that at all. You hear a willingness to accept accountability, although it's very difficult to change, a willingness to change, although it's scary to change, and a genuine concern that their behaviors are harming their child because they don't want that. And those are the key differences. And so I have people say to me all the time, do they know they're doing it? Yes, they do. Even if it's automatic and they're doing it because it's something they've always done, when it's brought to their attention, then you'll really hear the difference. Because for a narcissistic parent, they're not going to take accountability. They're going to tell you you're overreacting. They're going to tell you, oh, well, you hurt me too. Or, oh, well, I'm not perfect. What do you want from me? I'm trying my best. That's the kind of response you're going to get. So that's the biggest thing I hear often is, do they know they're doing this? And the second question I get is, do they love me? Because just like intimate relationships, when an adult child realizes after years that they've been dealing with a parent that is a narcissist, in this case, a mom that is a narcissist, there's this moment of kind of a, oh shit, like this is what I'm dealing with. Okay, now this makes sense. And you start replaying all of these interactions and all of these scenarios over the years. It never quite made sense to you, but now it does because you have a name for it. And with that name, you have characteristics and you have common behaviors. And you can now start to fit pieces of the puzzle together that didn't quite make sense because here you are thinking it's always been your fault, feeling like you're crazy, feeling like no matter what you did, it didn't matter. But now you realize that's not the case. And so the next question that naturally comes up is, well, do they even love me? If they're purposely manipulating me and they're purposely hurting me all throughout my life so they can maintain power and control over me, do they even love me? And this is, as you can imagine, a really difficult question to even have to come up with, right? Because as parents, myself, a parent of 3 kids, we unconditionally love our children, right? I mean, that's just a given. So with narcissistic moms, they love their children in conditions. They love their children so long as the child is, at any age, doing what is expected of the narrative that has been given to them since birth, right? So since birth, you get a narrative. You are to play that role your whole life. That role is meant to put you in a certain pattern that the narcissistic mom is able to control and manipulate. Because remember, with narcissists, the main goal of narcissistic behavior is to gain power and control, to take away your autonomy, to take away your sense of self. And so when we look at parents who give their children this narrative from birth, it's basically a play-by-play on how you're going to view the world, how you're going to view yourself, how you're going to handle criticism that comes from your parents, how you're going to interpret everything around you, and what type of person you're going to be. But eventually what happens is your sense of self starts to hit a wall against this narrative that's been given to you since birth. and you start to realize that you have different values or different morals or different interests than what's been told you have to have. And it's when you start to see that dichotomy and challenge that narrative that the arguing within the families really start, because now you're stepping out of line. You're messing up the dance that has been in place for decades, if not generations, as a means to control and manipulate your standing in the world. So do narcissistic moms love their kids? They love them when they are performing as the narcissist wants them to perform. They love them so long as the child is doing what is expected of them. But as soon as that child steps out of line, and by line, I don't mean misbehave, I mean steps out of line of that narrative that's been given to them, that's when the chaos starts. That's when you become the bad child. That's when you become the child that neglects their mom. That's when you become the child that is disrespectful of their mom. So, one of the things you'll hear me say a lot is this idea that any step towards autonomy that the narcissistic child, whether it's a child, teen, adolescent, adult, any step towards autonomy that the child takes away from the narcissistic mom is going to be interpreted by the narcissistic mom as abandonment and disrespect. For example, you're applying to college in California and you get in and you have wanted to go to California for college your entire life. But the narcissistic mom is not having that. She wants you close. Or she wants you going to a college that she wants you to go to. So anything that's different from what is expected of you is going to be viewed by a narcissistic mom as disrespectful or as abandonment. I've raised you your entire life. I sacrificed my entire life for you, only for you to pick up and abandon me and move to California. What, you don't love me enough? What, I didn't give you enough? How could you just leave me like that after everything I've done for you? I've gone to all your soccer games. I've gone to all your basketball games. I've been there for you when your girlfriend broke up with you. I wiped your tears away. I've cooked for you your whole life. I have made your life absolutely perfect. And now you're going to repay me with moving 6 hours across the country to college? What did I do to deserve this? And what they're doing is they're tapping into the shame and guilt that they for so long have manipulated their child by. And here you have this child who's trying to be their own person, but it's blocked by this swarm of guilt and shame. And how could you? And because that's all this child knows, it's very easy for the child to feel like they're doing something wrong, and they will feel like they're doing something wrong. And even if I were to say to them, okay, here's the situation. You're doing nothing wrong. You're going to college. This is your dream. This is your life. You're not doing anything wrong. Even if you go to California, you're still going to feel guilty and you're still going to feel bad because that has been ingrained in your brain since day one. It's interesting. As a parent myself, the thought of my kids growing up and moving away to college, there's a pit in my stomach. At the same time, of course, I want them to spread their wings and fly and go away and do what they need to do and make happy lives for themselves. And as a parent, we are to raise our children into healthy little people and hope that they spread their wings and fly away from us. They're not going to need us in the same way. That's part of growing up. And that's part of being a good parent, is as much as it pains us to watch our kids leave us, we also know that that's the healthiest thing for them. Their growth and their ability to spread their wings and fly should not be pulled down by our own fear of losing control over them. And that's what a narcissistic mom will do to her children. We see this when they start dating. We see this when they get married. And we see this when they have children of their own. Narcissistic moms view their daughters as extensions of themselves. So we joke around, people say, oh, your daughter's such a mini version of you. And yeah, by looks and, by personality, sure, okay. But it takes it a step further with narcissistic moms and their daughters. Narcissistic people in general view those around them as objects, as interchangeable objects, and they exist only to the extent that they can get something from the person. Narcissistic mothers will view their daughters as accessories, as extensions, almost as like limbs, like an extra arm or an extra appendage, like a handbag. And when the handbag works for that outfit that day, they use it. It's great. But when that handbag doesn't work for the day, you don't really exist. You're bad. What you do is bad. What you say is bad. But when you're needed, you are showered with love. You are showered with promise and all of these things. In a way, you're kind of love bombed. So as long as you are as long as you are serving the purpose the narcissist needs in any given moment, then yes, quote, you are loved. But as soon as you don't, you're bad, right? So she wants you to dress a certain way, but then 14 rolls around and you develop a different style. And so you start dressing a different way instead of the parent saying, okay, well, I don't love it, but that's you and that's your taste. And I respect that. A narcissistic mom is going to view that as a direct insult and a direct jab at her, that you are betraying her, that you are abandoning her. How could you do this to her after everything she's done for you? So that child then, to avoid that wrath and avoid those repercussions, will not go outside of that narrative. They'll remain in that little box that was created for them, not because they want to, but because it's easiest. And also because that's where they are given the illusion that the narcissistic parent, quote, loves them. As long as they're doing what's told of them, they'll be okay. And as a child, well, yeah, that's what you're going to do. You need to make sure you're okay. So you're going to do what's asked of you. And here's where, it gets really tricky, because if that child growing up has a totally different temperament, totally different sense of self, and it's in direct contrast all this time to the narrative that this narcissist has been giving to this child, that child's going to get depressed and anxious. In fact, that child has no idea that there's even another option of who they could be. So when they get into adulthood, and when patients come to me now as grown adults and they say, I'm realizing now that I think my mom is a narcissist and everything kind of makes sense, and now I don't know what to do. Because they're my mom and I love them and I don't want to hurt them. At the same time, they are not respecting my boundaries, or they're putting all this on me, or they're interfering in my marriage with my husband, or they're bashing my parenting abilities. Because you have to remember, getting married, moving out, having children, those are all steps towards autonomy, all of which a narcissistic mom is not going to be okay with, because it's less control that she has over you now. She doesn't have access to you all the time anymore, right? So growing up, she may have been able to control what you eat and what you look like and who you're with and how you think of yourself. She may have said that you were brutally unattractive. She may have called you fat. She may have told you that you have no friends, or she may have told you that you're stupid. But then the next day may have told you that you're brilliant. And then the next day told you that she loves you and you're beautiful. And it's so confusing for you, because there's no rhyme or reason for it. So now, as a grown adult, that you've separated a little bit from that, she's now lost control. She doesn't like that, because unless there are people around her for her to control, she has no way to get supply. And so what's one way that a narcissistic mom can go after her adult child in an effort to gain control over them. One of them is driving a wedge between the adult child and her husband, which we see all the time. It could be anything from bad-mouthing the spouse, making up lies about the spouse, showing up unannounced at the house. It could be being really difficult around holidays about spending time with them. You always spend it with your husband's family. You never spend it with us. We're no longer a part of your family. It's embarrassing to us. They definitely do it through parenting. If you have children of your own, it's not uncommon for them to tell you that you're not doing a good job as a parent, or that now that you're married and you have children, you've been neglecting us. We've done so much for you your entire life, and this is how you pay us back. It could be telling you that your children are so poorly behaved because you're not a good parent, even when that's not the case. Again, all of these comments are for the sole purpose of trying to regain control over you because they've lost it. And it's going to be your job as an adult child now to start to set boundaries with them. And that's really difficult because now there's a whole bunch of layers. You have kids who have grandparents now, right? And the kids maybe are too young to understand. And there's a very big chance that the narcissistic mom is going to be an amazing grandparent to those kids because she wants to look good. Remember, part of this is looking good to her family, the outside world. Right? She wants to look like number one grandmother. So there's all these things that take place and shift over time when you're dealing with a narcissistic mom. As an adult, when you come to realize that you are dealing with a parent that's a narcissist, in this case, a mom, chances are you've been told that your spouse is not a good choice for whatever reason. You've been told that you're not a good parent. You've been told that you're letting yourself go, or they will show up unannounced at your house. They will interfere with parenting. They will cause chaos around events such as your child's birthday, your spouse's birthday, holidays. As they're getting older, they may get sicker, and they may put it all on you to have to take care of them. And if you don't take care of them, you're a horrible child. Right? We hear this all the time. I sacrificed my life for you, and this is how you repay me. So there's a mourning process that happens with adult women of narcissistic mothers. And the mourning process is mourning the loss of the relationship that you really wanted so desperately that you're never going to have. And there's this word that I think we all fall prey to, and this word that really screws us up. And that word is hope. And you just keep hoping that this time, maybe she'll be different with you. This time, maybe she'll realize that if she doesn't stop this, now that you're a grown adult and you have more resources, that you won't talk to her anymore. Maybe this time will be better. The problem is it won't. If your mother has narcissistic personality disorder, that will not get better. If anything, over time it gets worse because they start to get older and they start to lose their looks and they start to lose more control. So they get more agitated, they get more angry, they get more bitter. And it's going to be up to you to set boundaries. You're going to feel brutally uncomfortable. You're going to feel wrong. You're going to feel guilty. You're going to feel like a horrible person and a horrible child. And this is only because you're a good person. Because outside of narcissistic relationships, our brains don't operate like this. In what world are we trying to protect ourselves from our parents? We're not, right? They should be there for us unconditionally. Now, granted, All relationships have their crap. And, we all have to put boundaries up with our parents here and there. And that's a given. That's always going to happen. But narcissistic parents are uniquely different in that you'll set a boundary. They won't abide by it. They won't respect it. And you'll always be the bad guy. And you have to kind of go along knowing that you're always going to be the bad guy. Being willing to be the bad guy, but at the same time knowing that you're not, sometimes is necessary when you're setting boundaries with narcissistic moms. They will never be done until they have convinced you of that narrative that they sold to you many, many, many years ago. So some people are, wondering, do I go no contact? Or do I just set limits? And what does that look like? And here's what I tell people. You don't have to pick go no contact 100% and immediately, go forth. You don't have to do that. What you can do is slowly, and this is what I recommend, slowly start to set some boundaries with them, depending on the situation. For example, I like everything to be in writing. I don't like any phone call conversations, emails and texts only. So that's the first step. Limit your phone calls and only do text and email, okay, if you can. When you're texting them, if it's benign stuff about how the day was or how your kid did in soccer or what your plans are for the day, that's fine. As soon as the manipulation starts, as soon as the digs come, or if they do something that is so part of their manipulative strategy, you do not respond to that particular text at all. You ignore it. If 5 minutes later they text you and they say, did you have a nice day today? You can write back to that and say yes. Short and sweet. And what this does is it kind of shapes the way you start to respond to their manipulation. If they want a response, the only way they're going to get a response from you is if it's not manipulative. Now, whether they outwardly see that or not, that's not your problem, but you're going to be very selective in when you choose to respond to them. In general, all your responses to a narcissistic mom need to be fact-based only. No emotions, no emotion words, no abstract stuff like, why do you always do this? Or, something like, can't you just be happy for me? Nothing like that. It's only, yes, your son got an A in math class today. We're really proud of him. If she comes back and says, oh, well, he didn't get that from his mother, you don't respond to that, even though it's killing you. In addition to that, plans. This is a big thing with narcissistic moms and adult children, particularly when they have children themselves. They're going to do what they can to interject in your life, showing up unannounced, okay? Showing up at bad times, showing up when you told them not to. And so this is where your significant other, if you have one, has to get involved. And I know this is going to sound weird, but you don't let them in. You text them and say, this is not a good time. I told you that. You can come back another time. That's it. No more, no less. Because the coming to the house and showing up unannounced from a narcissistic mom, it's not just to be rude. And quite frankly, it's not just to be controlling. It's to show you that they very much still have access to your space and to your world without you giving consent. And that's a massive violation. That's your home, that's your space, and that's unacceptable. So showing up unannounced, you tell them not to do that anymore. They probably will test your boundaries and probably won't listen. That doesn't mean your boundary didn't work. Remember, your boundaries are for you, not for them. If they show up, you don't answer the door. If they show up, you tell them they need to go home. It's going to be uncomfortable, but that's on purpose. The key thing with this, though, is that if you're going to set a boundary, make sure it's a boundary you can keep 100% of the time, because what you don't want to happen is you tell them not to show up, they show up, you don't let them in, you keep your boundary. But then the next day they show up again unannounced. And this time you just are so annoyed with them. You just say, all right, forget it. Just come in for 5 minutes. What you're doing is not only setting inconsistent boundaries, but you're basically showing them that they just have to keep doing it and eventually you'll give in. And you don't want that either. That's your home, that's your house, that's your space. And if they're not going to respect it, you need to respect it even more on their behalf. So that's another thing that we see a lot come up. They will also routinely start on birthdays, on holidays, any type of family gathering. There will be some sort of drama that occurs, some sort of issue that happens. You can't control what they're going to do. So what I tell my patients time and time again is when the holidays are approaching, when a birthday is approaching, when a graduation is approaching, or if you get a job promotion or anything that is a big deal, anything that is a heightened time of year, I can't tell you what they're going to do, but just be on the lookout for something to happen. Okay? Someone's going to say they're sick. I've had people where their elderly parents just of all days happen to fall on their birthday. I mean, I've heard it all. So you just need to be prepared for where you're going to go with that and how you're going to handle that. Know that it's uncomfortable, but know most importantly, you're not doing anything wrong. All of these are moves to gain power and control over you. They don't want you to be happy, sad, angry, confused, hurt, unless it's them putting those emotions into you. So it's not that narcissistic parents just want you to be upset and have low self-esteem. They just want to be the ones to make it happen. So they want to be the ones to get you the gorgeous birthday present for your 30th. They don't want somebody else getting it for you. So even though that's not a negative emotion, it's still them being responsible for giving you that emotion. They want to be in charge of how you think and how you feel, which is why they view autonomy as a threat to that control, as a threat to that power. And you'll see a lot of sabotaging. The other unique thing about narcissistic moms and daughters is that narcissistic mothers are routinely jealous of their child. And I know for those of you listening that have kids and you're thinking about this, like, how could I ever be jealous of my daughter? I want her to do the best she possibly can. I want her to do better than me in life. Narcissistic moms are always jealous of their children, particularly their daughters. This is why they will go through so much to ensure that their daughters have low self-esteem, or that their daughters don't think they can do things on their own without the input from the mom. They are jealous of how they look. They're jealous of their careers. They're jealous of their relationships, not just romantic relationships. They're jealous of their friendships. They don't want their daughters to have anything above and beyond what they gave them. Again, it's viewed as abandonment and disrespect. How dare you spend more time with your friends? They don't do for you what I do for you. So you can imagine growing up in this environment, how much damage that can do to your sense of self. And as you become an adult, and you realize that this is the person that you've been dealing with, in a sense, you have this eye-opening aha moment. And it's in that moment you realize, well, wait a minute. Maybe this wasn't ever my fault. Maybe I'm not a bad person. Maybe I'm actually really talented. Maybe I am attractive. Maybe I am capable of having healthy relationships. And when you have that epiphany, and now you start to realize, like, oh my God, was my whole life a lie? And I hear that so much from my patients. Was they ever love me? Was that all a lie? I don't understand. Now what? And it's that now what that becomes tricky. Because now that you realize what you've been dealing with, do I set boundaries? Do I not set boundaries? Do I go no contact? Do I not go no contact? Do I let my kids see them? Do I not? What do I do? Do I include them in holidays? Do they come to my wedding? I mean, there's all these questions that you now have to answer based on the stage of life that you're in. And so for those of you listening that can relate to this, understand you don't need to make a definitive decision now. It's important to kind of gather the facts first for yourself, because this is a real kind of just mind-numbing realization. And you're going to have these moments where, either with your own kids or as you get older, where something happens and you say, oh my gosh, I never would have done that like that to my kids, and realize what your parents or your mom in this particular case had done to you, and realize how sick it was. There's going to be a lot of those light bulb moments that go off that really kind of knock you on your feet for a second and say, oh my God, I can't believe that happened. Or I can't believe she did that. And you will feel this really kind of confusing sense of, I love them because it's my mom, but at the same time, she's evil, right? Or I love her, but she's so vicious to me. And how to kind of come to grips with both of those things. And then that's obviously where therapy comes in. But what I work with people on is separating those two things, that you can still set boundaries in whatever that looks like with the narcissistic mom. As long as you understand there will be no change on her part. A lot of adult children wait for the parent to just take accountability for their actions. If they just said they were sorry for all this, I could at least be okay. And my response to that is, if you wait for a thank you or a genuine apology in order to move forward, you're never going to get it. Particularly from a narcissist, because if your mom knows that you're hanging on for hope, that she's going to accept all accountability for this so that you can move on without her, that's the last thing she's going to do. I can promise you that. She wants to keep you stuck in this back and forth of, I love her, but I'm mad at her. I love her, but that's exactly where they want you. So you need to, for yourself, start to gain objectivity to your narcissistic mom's behavior and the reality of who you are. Because the reality of who you are is not connected to her. She's just made you think that for so long. Your ability to make decisions independent of her exists. It always existed. You were just taught that it didn't. Your ability to build a life for yourself without her input has always been there. She just tricked you into thinking that it wasn't. So once you realize that you can exist separate from a narcissistic mom, your entire world opens up. You realize that you are capable of doing whatever you want to do. As long as you understand that you will never get the support that you want from your mom, unless it benefits her. Unless, let's say, you get some amazing achievement award and you're being honored at some dinner and you can invite family. Oh, she'll show up. She'll show up. She'll clap for you. She'll cheer for you. She'll brag about you. She will love every moment of that. So it's up to you to determine how, when, and where you want her in your life. And any decision you make is a good decision. And you're always allowed to change that. Because remember, as you take more steps towards autonomy and they get older, the need for control increases, but the ability to control decreases, right? So that's why a lot of times it goes to things like, it'll start with the grandkids. They'll bypass you and start calling the grandkids directly to ask for plans. Or they'll buy the grandkids gifts that they know you don't want them to buy for them. So those kinds of things start to happen. And again, this is where you're going to need to take a step back and realize that this is the behavior of a narcissist trying to gain control, trying to make you look like the bad one, trying to make you look like you're overreacting. Oh, mom, what's the big deal? It's just a phone. Why can't we keep it? Right? So you need to be mindful of how these behaviors change over time. And that at any point you can set a boundary. But if you wait, and I cannot stress this enough, if you wait to feel comfortable setting a boundary with your narcissistic mom, it's never going to happen. If you wait until they change one day, it's never going to happen. Their goal for you is for you to be an extension of them. You like what they like, you talk how they talk, you dress how they dress, you do what they say. If you don't, you're bad. And if you're bad, then they have no purpose for you. And so these are the things I just want you to think about as you go through the process of maybe uncovering later in life that you were living with a narcissist, or that you knew your mom was a narcissist, but you didn't know how to deal with it. The one thing I will tell you this is that it is not your fault, not even remotely close. And it is also not your job or responsibility to fix them, change them, or, quote, get them to see it. They won't. They're actively choosing not to see it. Because if they see it, then they have to admit to it. And if they admit to it, then they have to change it. And none of those are going to happen. You're also not doing anything wrong. And when people say, but it's your mom, you only have one mom, the response that I like to tell people to give is correct. And I'm her daughter. I'm her daughter. Because when you say I'm her daughter, well, yeah, now that changes it a little bit. Listen, you don't owe parents unconditional respect just because they birthed you. You owe parents respect based on how they respect you. If they abuse you, if they verbally abuse you, if they neglect you, you don't owe them anything. You were too busy trying to survive. Narcissistic moms routinely will neglect their children growing up. They'll leave them at home if they go on dates. They'll leave them at home if it interferes with their plans. They will refuse to feed them. They will refuse to do laundry for them. They may present them to look really good to the outside world, but inside, they may look at anything maternal as beneath them. You may have been food shopping and showering and doing your homework alone since the age of 5. But you probably didn't tell anyone because, again, it's shame-based. And they do that on purpose so that it doesn't get out, so that people don't know. And this is why they know what they're doing, for that exact reason. So all of the neglect and the abuse and the abandonment and all of the things that you dealt with growing up, now as an adult, you have way more resources. You don't have to take it. You don't have to own it anymore. It's not yours, and it never was. You just didn't have any other resources to help you, because chances are your dad, if dad was in the picture, probably tried his hardest to fly under the radar, to never get involved, to just appease his wife, told you just do what mom asks of you, because he didn't want to deal with her wrath. Because guess what? While you're setting boundaries as an adult child and he's still with her at home, guess who's getting the wrath now? He is. Your boundary setting with your mom as an adult is not benefiting dad, because now dad is going to get the wrath. And so it's not uncommon for dad to call the adult child and say, listen, can you please just talk to your mother? Can you guys just please make up? What he's really saying is, I can't handle her now that you're setting appropriate boundaries with her, because I'm too far gone in this and I have no way out. And the more boundaries you set with her, the more I need to take on and the more of her wrath I get to see. So can we please go back to the old way of interacting where I didn't have to deal with her? And for those of you listening, I guarantee you've heard that at least once. A lot of times with narcissistic moms, the dads are the enablers. They are as much to blame, as the moms. Because they were not trying to save you from this. They were trying to stay afloat, just like you were trying to stay afloat. But nobody jumped in to help you swim to shore. And so these enablers that are present as you're growing up are just as much responsible. Is it unfair now as an adult that you're the one in therapy and that you're the one trying to set these boundaries and that you're the one having to deal with this? Absolutely, 100%. It is not fair. Not fair. But it is your responsibility if you want to live a fulfilled life. And I think sometimes that's the hardest part for people, especially with my patients. Like, why is this? Why do I have to deal with this? I've dealt with so much already. Why am I the one in therapy? Because the children of the narcissistic parents are always the ones that end up in therapy, not the narcissist. Sometimes the narcissistic mom will say, we need family therapy, which I strongly do not recommend. And the narcissistic mom will find the therapist that she approves of, and you'll go to therapy and you won't feel comfortable speaking about things because mom's there, and she'll charm the therapist and it'll make it look like she's trying, but you as the child are not trying and you need to try more and your mom loves you, and it's not going to work. So my recommendation is for you to get therapy of your own. Somebody who understands the nuances of narcissistic abuse and the dynamics, and really focus hard on your boundary setting. That is going to be critical. And simultaneously understand that none of this is your fault. You survived something extremely difficult. And to be able to come out on the other side of this with the awareness that something's not right and that you don't like the narrative that you've been told to live your entire life and you want to make these changes, and you know these changes are going to be met with wrath from your narcissistic mom, but you're doing it anyway. I mean, that's the strongest possible thing you could do. And you'll realize that as you start to set boundaries and change your behaviors and live a life that's more in line with the things that you value, not the things that you were told to value, you're going to naturally just feel so much more fulfilled, way less anxious, way less depressed. So I hope that is clear in terms of narcissistic moms and the abuse and, how to manage it later in life as an adult, either with your own family or just kind of, not living at home anymore. It looks different than narcissistic dads, and it definitely looks different than narcissistic moms and their sons. That's a very different dynamic. So that's why I really just wanted to focus today on today's episode on narcissistic moms and their daughters in particular, because again, like the dynamic is very different and very unique from sons, but we will definitely get into that. I hope this was helpful, and I will speak to everybody soon. Everybody have a great day. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Next Up Narcissism. I hope you found it useful, but most importantly, I hope you found it validating. Want to work one-on-one with me? Visit my website at drjamiezuckerman.com to book a personalized coaching session, and be sure to check out my on-demand workshops on topics like co-parenting with a narcissist, life after leaving, anxiety management strategies, and more. Again, that's drjamiezuckerman.com. You'll also find links to my interactive workbooks, merchandise, resources, and newsletter sign up. Next Up Narcissism is as much your podcast as it is mine. I want to hear your feedback and what you want to hear. So make sure to leave a podcast review wherever you listen, or send an email to nextup@drjamiezuckerman.com. Again, that's nextup@drjamiezuckerman.com. Be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Make sure to tune in next week to see what's up next on Next Up Narcissism.